The arguments from beauty for the existence of God. That's right, we're not discussing an argument, but 5 different ways beauty can be used to argue that God exists.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
Unsuccessfully arguing for God's existence. Because beauty is a dopamine response in your brain that causes a sense of pleasure. Everybody will have different things that trigger this kind of sense of pleasure. This is just part of the human experience.
Jumping into things, the first argument goes like this. Look at the trees, man. There must be a God. Now, this isn't really an argument in the traditional sense because, well, it doesn't have premises that we can argue about. It's really just mysterious and mystical. Nonetheless, many find this to be quite persuasive, myself included. But I personally prefer non-mysterious arguments that could be analyzed logically, so let's move on to some of those.
This is not an argument at all. I don't know why people are convinced by the "look at the trees" type of rhetoric. Or why some apologists like this guy and Braxton Hunter like it at all. It literally makes no sense because beauty is not absolute or objective in any kind of sense. Alright, I'm gonna predict using my Miss Cleo powers that none of these arguments are gonna sufficiently prove that God exists. And the reason why I don't think any of them are gonna work is because without God, beauty would still exist. People could still experience beauty. But without someone, whether or not they're human or otherwise, to experience this sensation, beauty would not exist.
The second argument is based on the nature of beauty itself. Many incredibly varied things have the mysterious property of beauty. Plants, abstract objects, or the character of individuals just scratches the surface of the diversity of beauty.
Which is all subjectively determined by the observer to be beautiful. What is beautiful to one person may be ugly or bland to another. This is perfectly explained chemically because everybody's emotions are triggered by different things. These emotions are what our brain experiences when chemicals like serotonin and dopamine flood our neural receptors. If you have a natural explanation for why something happens, then you don't need to suggest a supernatural explanation to further explain it.
Now, to have a good argument, we need to get from these things have the property of beauty to God exists. We could do this by mirroring the structure of the moral argument, which goes from things have the property of being moral to God exists.
If you're going to model any argument off the moral argument for God, you're going to have a bad time. Because the moral argument is very bad. The moral argument makes the assumption that absolute morals exist. The argument fails to realize that morality requires a mind to exist. Just like with beauty, morals exist without a God, but they cannot exist without someone to hold them.
William Lane Craig's formulation of the moral argument goes like this. If God does not exist, then objective moral values do not exist, but objective moral values do exist, therefore God exists.
Objective here should really be absolute, because that's what Craig means. You can be objective about morals, but morals themselves cannot be objective. So whenever you hear an apologist say objective morality, what they really mean is absolute morality, which is a ridiculous concept. Even within Christianity, you do not find an absolute moral foundation. The Christian set of morals have changed over the span of its history, demonstrating the subjectivity of morality. This just goes to show that morality is inherently subjective.
Now, I've explained elsewhere that I'm not a huge fan of that formulation, and instead prefer constructing the moral argument thusly. We can now repurpose this and get a pretty good argument from beauty. This argument, put simply, is saying that if there is such a thing as beauty, which is a real feature of reality, then this cries out for some sort of deeper or more fundamental explanation. But if we try to imagine any theory of this deeper explanation, it always seems to work better with the existence of God. You could ground beauty in the nature of God, or the will of God, or in the properties of natures instantiated by God. And since the existence of God works so well with providing an explanation for the nature of beauty, then God probably exists.
You serious?
Oh man. Alright, well, Point 1 seems perfectly reasonable, albeit it doesn't really do anything for you. Point 2 through 4 is kind of fuckered, though. You're gonna need to do something else with these mangy-ass things, because they will not hold shit up. Beauty is not more than preference. Things are not inherently beautiful. We experience beauty as an emotional reaction to stimuli. Looking at things objectively, one collection of atoms is really no different than another collection of atoms. It's our human experience that allows us to have this sense of beauty.